Hi, my name is DSFEBRUARY, and you may have seen that lately I've been posting T-edit videos, or at least Terraria videos, on my channel, because I've been making a map in there, but I decided I'd rather give a little bit of a short tutorial on how I've been using T-edit. I know there's a really good tutorial out there by Chaos, I'll probably link, but other than that, there's not a lot of people that have T-edit tutorials, and not a lot of people that really do this in general, so I figured I'd throw my own into the mix. So first, you want to make sure you come to the binary construct website. If you don't do this, there's a high chance you could get a virus from anyone else. There's a lot of people out there trying to release stuff that is malicious. So you know you're in the right place if you're on the binary construct website. I'll go and link that in the description. But then once you get here, you just go to downloads, and it'll take you to this Git, and then you go ahead and you just get the newest version. I always choose to use the latest beta. Just because that's what I'm more comfortable with, and really the betas aren't that unstable, especially for something like T-edit. And of course, with the new betas, you get the most up-to-date stuff. So we go and download that one, and then once you're done with that, you go and extract the whole file, and you just boot up T-edit from right here, right in the file. And then it'll take it just a second. Shouldn't take longer than about 2 minutes. If it does, I would consider re-downloading the entire thing. The first thing you're going to see is the latest news. You can choose to toggle this on or off depending on like if you want to see the latest news or not. I choose to keep it on because in case there's an update or something that broke, they always let you know right here. So you always see this booting up first. If you try to click on this, it won't let you. So you're going to close that, and then you'll see this. So first thing that you'd want to do, of course, you want to edit a world. You have to open one up. So I'm going to go and open up the world that I have been editing, which is going to be located in your games. I keep mine in the team mod loader folder. It doesn't automatically open that up because modding or editing modded worlds isn't fully supported. But I don't have any modded items in my world. I only have a few modded things for like characters and stuff, and that's not a huge issue. It's not going to corrupt anything. So do be careful about that, and always make a copy if you're going to be editing a modded world. It'll give you a pop-up if you are, but just make sure of that. So of course I keep it in Tmod loader. It will be in here. I keep a copy out here just in case, and then I have my couple worlds right here. And then yeah, it'll tell you make a backup if it's a modded world. I'm gonna continue, and then you'll see here is my world. It's a lot more ugly, zoomed out. Of course, you need to zoom in and zoom out just with the mouse wheel here. You can also use these two buttons right here. It'll always prioritize zooming into the top left corner, and depending on what you're using, it'll either zoom into where your mouse is, or it'll just zoom in up here, which is a little bit annoying, but I've only had that do it on one separate device that I've been using. You'll notice that I have a huge section of the world that still exists. This is what a standard Terraria cross-section looks like with the dungeon. You can see a couple marble and granite biomes over here, and then hell, and then like the ocean. And then right here I have a huge section of the world just cut out. That way I can quickly edit things in the air in general. You also notice that the walls in the background are a little bit more different than from where they should be. And the surface wall or the sky wall is a lot wider than it should be. I do that for just sake of map editing. It lets me, like, you can always put a background wall behind what you're working with. Like, you can always put a background wall like this, but you can't ever remove these walls from behind anything. So if you put a window, this is what you're going to see because the game thinks you're underground. So this is of course adjustable. I'll show that in a second. And the only real thing that it affects is music. Underground music will play right here, and then cave music will play right here, and then of course hell music will play in this underground section right here, and then space music will play up here. And it's a pretty good indicator of where the sky ends and turns into space. But more on that later. So you'll see that all the colors, or all the blocks have, the tiles have a certain color, but when you zoom in, they might completely change. That is because it renders in everything while you are working on it. So like when I'm zoomed out this far, this lizard brick is all completely brown, but when you zoom in to about this point, it'll actually render the things. You might notice it runs a little bit slower, and that's because it's actively rendering everything in as if it were in game. But you'll also notice that there are some things you can do in T-edit that you can't do in-game. Like, certain things look a little different, like these platforms. If these are placed in T-edit, you have to make sure to put the backing platforms, but unfortunately it will delete anything behind it. These were placed or sorry, you have to place them. If you place them like this in T-Edit, there won't be these backing platforms. But in-game, they're auto-generated. So these were placed in-game, and these are auto-filled in-game. But I do have a spot down here that these are placed in T-Edit, and they don't automatically fill back in. So that's something I have to adjust in-game. So there are a few differences, like you might want to not exclusively work in-game or in T-Edit, but you might want to work in both simultaneously. There are a lot of things like scale that's hard to realize unless you're in-game, because this seems pretty big, but all of this can be on one screen at once. And that's not something that you really realize when you're working in Engine. So other than that, I'm rambling there, I'm going to go and show what each of these do. So first you've got just new, just opens up a new file. I won't be doing that for sake of this video because I want to be editing this world that I'm working in. But you can completely adjust the width and height of the world, and then of course the surface level and cavern level, and you can get a lot more into it, which is pretty cool. You can choose to not generate the underworld or ash or lava, and you can add noise to the roof and floor, which is pretty neat, and then the generate ores. That is really nice for worlds where you don't want the generation to look like this. It gives you a lot more options just to start with a world, because it's really hard to make something like this, which is why I kept this section in case I ever need it. You can't generate this in a world. I'm sure you can copy and paste it from another world, but just in case I want a little bit of the actual Terraria world in here. But you know, because it's always easier to destroy than make. Other than that, you've got your, like I said earlier, your zoom in and zoom out. You got your save button right here that just saves it, nothing crazy. And then your open button right here. I usually go right here to do it anyway, but these right here are all the same buttons right here. And then of course you have your delete section. That's literally the same thing as just pressing the delete button. So if I were to take a whole section right here and then press that, completely gone. That'll even erase background walls and everything. Like you'll see, like I could take a section right here, press delete, completely gone. Nothing in this space. Wires, walls, tiles, sprites, everything will be deleted. And the same thing happens if I press this button. And you can go and press undo, or you can press redo. So that's all that right there. Same thing with like crop. I don't want to do this. It's a little resource intensive, especially it depends on how much you're cropping. But it will crop the entire world. Do not want to continue. It'll crop an entire new world into just this selection. This will be the entire size of the world. This is in case you need to limit how big a world is when you're generating a new one, and you can always go bigger later on. But I definitely recommend saving cropping for later. Then, of course, you can copy the selection that you have, and then there's the paste selection. So I can go and just place a whole nother selection right there. It's all messed up. It's all screwed up, but in case you want to do that. And then, of course, yeah, paste. And then there's cursor. This really isn't used for anything other than making sure you can't click on something you shouldn't. And then it's also used for right-clicking on special tiles. So you'll see that in this special tile section right here, it'll load up which items are in this special tile, quote-unquote. And for chests, it'll load up every single space and each item. And if you want to adjust this, you just click on any space, you edit how many, you edit, you can edit the prefix if it's an item that can have it, and then you can edit which item it is. This list might take a little bit longer to generate because this is every single item in Terraria, and there are thousands. You can see everything, like there's the whole pumpkin section was like 100 long, everything that's purple, and it takes a very long time to scroll through. But that's how you edit chests, and always make sure to press save when you're editing a special tile. Same thing goes for like when I was writing dialogue for my signs for the announcement boxes. You right click it, and then you write, oh, here's your reward for your work so far. Please collect and continue. If you don't press save and you click on another special tile, you'll click back and all your work will be gone. It's happened to me several times before I learned my lesson. Make sure of that. And then next we have the selection tool. You saw me using that earlier. Literally the same thing that you do with really any selection tool and anything. The only thing you can't do is move it. But you can copy, delete, and then paste, and then just put it somewhere else like that. It's pretty neat. I'm going to leave that where it is. Then you have the pick block. This is the exact same thing as any other art program. You click on a tile, and it will pick the tile in front of it, the tile behind it, and if there are any extras. So if it's a half brick, if it's an actuated block, if it has an actuator on it, what paint it is, what kind of mask that has, and then any type of coating it has on that. It'll save all of the information. So you can see here it's dirt with a sandstone wall, and it's a full brick, no paint or anything. But if I were to go to somewhere like right here, this has white paint, this has white paint. If I were to click right there, it says tile, cobalt brick, there's no mask on it, disc wall with both of them. You can see right here that paint isn't selected, but if I were to place a block with these two selected right here, it would paint a blue it would paint a white cobalt brick and a white disc wall like it shows right here. Now paint doesn't really show up when you're super close to it because it tries to show you more of like what you're working with, but when you zoom out you can see that that's white paint. And then if I were to untoggle those, then you can see when I paint this, they look relatively the same. You can see this one is a little bit lighter, and when I zoom out, you can see the big difference. So it's a little tough working with stuff like that when, like, it's all blue and yellow right here, then I zoom out and it's white. It makes it really hard to spot which tiles are actually painted, but sometimes it's pretty easy to tell. So if I were to unclick tile right here and then paint a couple right here, oh no, those are painted white. Hold on. If I were to pick block right there, and then just kind of paint this whole section right here. Yeah, painting wall. Okay, I don't think it's block replacing, so I'll mention that in a second. But then the tool that I'm currently on is just the pencil. This is you paint one block and one wall at a time, and then you have your selections over here. You have your tile and wall, which is what I've been using. It allows you to paint whichever you're working with. If you don't have tile selected, it won't edit the tile. If you don't have wall checked off, it won't edit the wall. So if I uncheck both of these, the only thing it's going to do is paint, which is pretty nice. But I've left that on a few times, not realizing. Be very careful with that. And if I uncheck that, this is going to do nothing while I'm painting. But if I check air, it'll replace every single foreground block with an air block. And if I uncheck air and then check disc wall, this will replace every wall with a disc wall. You see how it works. The mask is just what you want to be editing. This is in case, like, if I edit matching and I have dirt block selected and air selected, it's not going to affect any of these blocks. Obviously, I have wall selected as well. It's not going to affect any of these blocks. It will only affect dirt blocks. That's in case you're working with something like this where you have like a fine line and you want to specifically paint out one type of block. That's what masks are used for. Undo that real quick, and then same goes for walls. And then extras is in case you have, like, if you want to create something like this where I have a half block. Doesn't show in the editor, but in game these will be lava falls because that's what half blocks do. And of course if I pick block that, you can see that it does lizard brick, cursed blue brick wall, and then brick style half brick. If I want to place one of those, I have to make sure that's checked and extras is checked. And then the next time I place a block, it'll be I forgot to disable my mask. There we go. It'll be a half brick. Even if it's not supposed to be like that, or it doesn't run like that in-game, the editor does not care. And then, of course, you can check if it's an actuator. So this shows if the block is actuatable, I suppose. Of course, it doesn't work on lizard brick. And then actuator/tile inactive sets it so the block is an inactive tile as if it were actuated in-game. This makes it so you don't have to load up Terraria, actuate the block or deactuate it, and then go back into T-edit. You can just place blocks as is. So I pick block the sand, and then I put inactive. Then I can have this whole sand pile right here, and you can walk straight through it as if it were actuated. Other than that, that's all the extras covered. Then there's just paint. You can, same thing with paint masks, where you can only edit the certain type of paint. But this just toggles what paint you want on the currently placed items. You can see that I'm placing sand, but if I go ahead and select purple, or click on it, purple for sand, it'll place purple sand. If I select deep lime on the wall, and then I go ahead and select a wall, so cursed green brick wall, if it'll actually select it. Sometimes this menu takes a second to load because the game is lagging from all the things it's generating in that list there. It does not want to select that. I'll do wood wall. There we go. See, I'm selecting, or I'm painting the purple for the tile, and then the deep lime for the actual wall itself. And then if I disable that, then it'll replace any of the walls with an unpainted version. Of course, it's the ugliest thing ever painted, but you get the point. And then coding works very similar to paint, but it works with the coding in-game. A little hard to tell, so I would definitely be careful with this, making sure you have them off. but let's say I want to paint some sand and I want illuminate paint on it. You can see it's much brighter. And this is the equivalent of painting something with illuminate paint in the game. They selected it as coating because it's not exactly the same as paint. But this is what causes things to glow and makes it completely visible in a nighttime environment. And then the exact opposite is true for echo. This makes objects, they show up a little bit darker, but in game, echo blocks are completely invisible. I use this right here where I don't want the player actually walking into lava because I don't want them to walk all the way back. They're not supposed to be able to actually die at this section, so I put some echo blocks. Now these aren't echo coated, but it's the exact same thing. Echo blocks can only be seen if you're wearing the echo goggles in game, and same goes for the echo paint. Any echo painted object acts as an echo block. So replacing that with that wouldn't change anything visually in Terraria or Tmod. It only changes it in T-Edit. We're going to disable that, and then same goes for walls. Like, I wanted these walls to be completely see-through in-game, which they are. They act as windows. But in-game, I also don't want enemies spawning. So there is, in fact, a wall here, but enemies can't spawn because, well, there's a wall. But you can see through, which is pretty neat. And then the paintbrush is the exact same thing, but you get to adjust how much you're editing at once. Of course, it'll replace any block that you have, except for liquids. So if I were to just click, it keeps all of the half blocks and then all of the triangulated blocks. Or up here, it just paints that. It basically does the equivalent of block swapping. So you can see that it'll even apply the same coating, because I have echo paint on that, which is pretty neat. And then other than that, you can change the shape. You can get ellipses, so instead it's a big circle, or you can choose to do diagonal right, which is, well, diagonal right, and then you choose how big that is, and then diagonal left, which is the exact same thing but the other way around. This is really useful for creating exact slopes, because it's a little hard creating slopes in Terraria. You can tell by my wiring here, where I chose a 2 wide. That way, when I wire from one location to the other and be lazy with it, it'll automatically wire those together. And one thing I didn't show is the paint mode over here, where you can swap from tiles to wires, per se. Like paint some red wire, and then I want to erase red wire. Now, wire is a little bit difficult to remember at first, but it's pretty easy to get a hold of. So if I paint red and green right here, you can see it's a red and green combined wire. But if I erase, oops, close that. If I erase and only select blue, it'll paint the blue off of the, I meant to say blue and green, not red and green. It'll paint the blue off the green. And I have to make sure to select green to also erase the green. And of course, red to erase the red. Now, if I were to place red, green, and yellow wire, and then untoggle that, and then, erase everything else, it'll erase everything except for yellow. And it's much easier to do with something like this, where I can just erase it all at once. Except for yellow, because I forgot to toggle that. See? Perfect example. And then, of course, there's wire replacement, where you can choose to replace wires with other wires. Pretty simple. The next tool is the hammer tool. This one it literally just takes objects and hammers them as if you were in game. So you can see that all of these are pretty jittery edges. This isn't something you'd actually see in Terraria, because they would be automatically, the way they're generated, they would look like this, which is exactly what the hammer tool does. Of course, you don't want to do it everywhere, but it makes it look a lot more natural just by softening the blocks. And of course, you can adjust the shape, how big it is. You can adjust the outline for, say, an ellipse. If you want to specifically adjust how big the circle is, it's pretty interesting. And then we have the paint bucket tool. This will take any block that you are currently selected on as a mask and paint over what block you currently have selected. So if I select off of wire and I go to tile wall and I select dirt, I can take the paint bucket tool and replace every single bit of dirt or a bit of sand that's connected to one another with dirt. Now you'll see it stops right here, and that's because I also have dirt wall selected. Now this sand right here is sand and air behind it, but this sand is sand and the sandstone wall behind it. And you can see where that's selected. The paint bucket also doesn't select hammered objects because it's not the same exact thing. Just be careful about placing anything in the air, because your T-Edit will freeze for just a moment before you see the worst thing you've ever seen in your life. I'm going to go ahead and undo that real quick. take a second. Cool. And then we have special interest points. The only one I really use is the spawn. You literally just go through, you select a special interest point that would be in the game, usually unmovable points, and then you just place it. So if I were to place a spawn right here, this is now the world spawn. If you use your magic mirror or anything that teleports you home in game, it'll teleport you to this spot exactly. You can also use this for NPCs. I can place a dryad here, I can place the golfer right here, and this will be their spawn point in game, which is really, really useful. Especially because it's really hard to move around NPCs in Terraria. Especially if you have permanent daytime or anything like that, and the NPCs will never move back home during night, or until it's night. That's exactly my problem in this area. And then you can also move stuff like the dungeon, something that is permanently set in world that you can see right here. There's a little D right here that says where the dungeon spawn is. And then next we have the sprite editor. This is, it's exactly what it says. You literally you pick up sprites, you select what sprite you want in game. This will be anything that's not technically a tile, and then you can just paint them in. Now you can also place sprites in ways that they're not supposed to be placed. For instance, life crystals will never generate in the air, but you can put them in the air, you can mess around with this, and most of the time they will stay exactly where they are. In Terraria, sometimes they will break and place themselves on the ground. It just depends on the item that you choose. This is really helpful for putting plants where they're not supposed to be. For instance, I have a lot of jungle plants in here and on, like, well, these are both oasis plants. Like this coral and these jungle plants, they would never generate here. And I wouldn't be able to generate oasis plants like this without actually building an oasis or having a naturally generated oasis, and that this isn't one of those. So this is really useful for placing stuff like that. And you can choose every single different type of style that you have. There's some things like forges where you only have 1 or 2 styles, but then there's other things like bookcases where you have every single style available from something that's built in-game. Now, this both includes stuff that you can build in-game and stuff you can't. And then you can, of course, place them in places they're not supposed to be, like this hanging sign, just place it on the ground, and that will stay there. I don't think there's anything too special about sprites themselves, but that's also available through right here. You can just choose to paint sprites right there. So this button does the exact same thing as this button right here. And then finally for the tools, we have the, I can't remember what it's called, the biomorph. It's pretty simple. You choose what you're gonna morph to. You choose what kind of moss you're gonna choose, and then, or like what kind of moss you want, and then you can add base tiles, moss, evil, and decorations to what you are purifying. For instance, if I choose purity, and then I were to choose, let's do xenon moss because it's really pretty, and I just purify this right there. And it's the exact same thing as if you're using Clementator in game, but of course you can choose what type of moss you want. That one's pretty self-explanatory. And then finally, we just have the tools up here. This is a lot of the similar tools over here, just gives you another place. You have your clipboard. Everything you've ever copied or pasted will be in this list, and then you can choose from it. So in case you have to copy multiple things, this is a really good place to just save up those copied things. So you don't have to do one at once. And then you can choose which of those tiles is going to actually be painted. So if I choose untick paste liquids, if I untick paste wires, well, there's no wires in this. I take off walls and I take off sprites, and then I paste this again. Exact same thing, but a lot more ugly because it doesn't paste liquids, the walls, or the sprites. And it's not replacing any of those as well. I'm going to take those back on before I forget. And you can empty your clipboard so it deletes everything you have, or you can import schematics or images, which is pretty neat for actually importing things into T-Edit, like images. It'll automatically place what blocks those should be, according to the pixels that they are on the map, like this, which is a pretty neat thing. And then finally you have your tallies. This will just say anything that's actually like any updates or anything inside of the T-Edit file. You got your world properties. This will be general anything. You can even change if it's the Chinese World Edition or the Console World Edition, because those are very different from the computer editions. You can choose what the moon phase is, including blood moon. You can choose if it's an eclipse. You choose the time, and I choose the time right here, and I make sure there is no there's no day-night cycle or whatever. It's just frozen this time exactly. You can choose sundial cooldown, whether how fast you want to use the moon dial or sundial. You can choose if it's raining or not, how long it's going to be raining, the max rain, and then you can choose slime rain. You can force whether it's going to be Halloween or Christmas. That's really useful for building maps that you really want it to be Christmas, but you don't want everybody to have to play during Christmas. Very specific, but useful tools nonetheless. You can choose sandstorm, the number of clouds, how fast the wind is going, where the cavern layer and the surface level are. That's how I adjusted where these walls are. And then you can choose to spawn a meteor. You can choose whether it's in Classic, Expert, Master, or Journey. This is really useful for swapping worlds after editing them in person. And then which books the player has actually used, which is also really useful. And then any special seeds. So that'll change like spawn rates and block placement and everything, depending on which seed you have. And then you can choose whether it's Crimson or Corruption, and then altars, and then all of the metals, which is pretty useful to swap between. Like there's the gold or platinum, and then you can choose not determined. This will change shops and everything, and then which bosses you've defeated, all organized by when they were added, which NPCs you've saved. So if you don't want them spawning in, you can untick saving them, and then Tavern Keep won't spawn in anymore. You can choose specifically which angler mission you're on, which NPCs you have unlocked, and then all the invasion, all of the backgrounds for like actual in-game backgrounds that you would normally swap with the world globes, and that's everything in world properties. And you have special tiles. This is what you saw earlier when I right-clicked on the chest and the sign, and it would put those special tiles. Sprites, you saw that earlier. Tile entities, this just counts how many entities of each. This isn't really going to be something you're using, but it really helps. It's like looking at your analytics in any program such as like Blender, looking at all the vertices. And then NPC data, you can change their names. That's really all there is for NPC right now. And then you get analysis of the world. You can analyze the entire world. This tells you absolutely everything there is to know about the world. This isn't really useful, but in case you want it, it's all the information that the code saves about your world everywhere, down to what quest you're on, how many angler quests have been done, or if the world is saved for those NPCs specifically, how many diamond gem spark blocks there are, how many illuminite bricks there are, and how much they consist of the entire world. And finally is creative powers. This will just be freeze time, rain, wind, biome spread. That should be taken for me. And then enemy difficulty and time speed. And really, you're not going to be using much of these over here. These are going to be the most useful tools, but everything in this is extremely useful. And then once you're done making your changes, you just pop over. First, you save. Always want to make sure you use that. And then you pop over to Terraria, or in my case, Team Mod Loader. You choose your character, go into your world, and boom, here's my spawn. I made sure it was raining. The time of day is, in fact, morning. And then the two NPCs spawn right here. And then it's really useful, like I said earlier, to pop between both the game and T-Edit. Just make sure you save and quit before editing in T-Edit. And also be careful about your players editing the worlds themselves. I noticed a lot during my game I'd be editing with the character, and then I would accidentally swipe and it would delete a plant. And now this is permanently gone. It won't be gone here, but if I save the world and then I were to reopen it in T-Edit, it's gone forever. However, if I quit the world and then I resave in T-Edit, it'll give me a warning about it being externally modified. You press OK, and now it's saved back again. So it undoes the changes made with your character. With all those tools, you can make anything you want. Terraria is basically just a giant pixel art game, and this is a really nice way of adding creative mode kind of into that. Terraria wasn't meant for that creative mode, but it's really useful for people like me who want to make maps in the game. That covers about everything. Thank you so much.